How do I deal with boredom? I notice that it's really hard to just sit in a room with nothing to do. How do I deal with boredom? Are you asking for a friend or asking for yourself? For me, how do I deal with boredom? Like me personally, watch a show in your target language. Well, let's say you're in a room with nothing to do, right? You're in a room, there's no TV, no, like you're in a deprived room, right? I tell myself stories in my head. What is the infinite, where does boredom spawn, right? Boredom spawns from an inability to entertain yourself. In my opinion. Sometimes I ask other people, how does boredom come about? What is your perception of boredom? My perception of boredom is when I stop thinking, when I don't have anything to think about. That's when boredom sits. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't usually run out of things to think about. However, I try my best to know that that's how a lot of people feel, though. When you sit in a room and you realize, well, there's nothing to do if it's not provided for me, right? It's not enough. I need something to provide that source of entertainment, right? Like, social media makes being bored seem like something terrible. Indeed. Like, you should always be doing something. Exactly. It's called it's what I usually refer to as the internet hustle culture. It's a symptom of the internet hustle culture. You're always hustling, and not just that they're giving you like quick hacks and stuff. It's also the element of that you have to keep doing things. You have to be doing things. You have to be achieving things. You're not like boredom. If you sit there and do nothing, is bad. Like, you have to keep going. You have to hustle along, keep on going. Here are more quick hacks. Here are more things. Here, this thing. So, however, the thing about boredom, in my opinion, is you have to ask yourself, do you need something to provide interest? And the reason why I ask that is, if you can answer yes or no, characterize it, as in like describe it to yourself. What is that thing you think you need, right? Need is in quotations because you don't literally need it, but figuratively, describe it, characterize it. Like, what does it offer you, right? And lots of times people would say, well, I need to learn something, or I need noise, or I need TikTok, for example. So when you are able to characterize what you need, then you can ask yourself, how do you address that? And you will be, in my opinion, I trust that the person who can answer those questions will find their own way of addressing boredom. For me, I can sit in a blank room and I'll just imagine the wall with canvas. The wall is my canvas. I'll draw something. Along the wall. If I don't have a pencil or paper, I'll just imagine it on the wall. You know, come up with a story in my head. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what are your dependencies? And a lot of times it comes to stimulation. And stimulation, this hyperstimulation from the internet, is what's in my opinion, is what's creating the dependency on needing a TikTok, your smartphone, you're coming to a state where this is the norm. So for you, your normal state is being hyperstimulated, right? And boredom can be a consequence of that. It's kind of like withdrawal. It's like a withdrawal symptom from it. And oftentimes, if you wanted to slowly treat boredom, like what I mean is gain the properties of being okay with boredom, you can, what a lot of people suggest these days, like disconnect progressively. As in, take it slowly. Spend 5 minutes breathing and not being attached to your dependency, right? The thing that if you can describe what you're dependent on, spend 5 minutes away from that. Then the next day, try for 6 minutes, then 7 minutes. And then when you can do that, find what else you can do in those minutes. You've liberated time. So that time can then be used and attached to something else. So for me, well, I don't run out of things to do. So I typically don't get bored, even if you strip me of everything. Like, for example, here's what I would do if the internet goes out. It did happen the other day. Like a week ago, the internet went out for 3 hours. I went to bed. I took a nap. I took a 1 hour nap. I took 1 hour for dinner. I practiced in my head. And then got back online for 3 hours to finish off my lessons on stream. It's actually one of the, there's 1 day recently that have 2 streams. So that's what I do, right? I don't get bored because I know how to use my time. My time is not dependent on one thing. And you have to become creative. It's necessary to be creative with that. So in order to treat boredom, in my opinion, in order to combat boredom, you have to explore boredom. Like you yourself have to explore boredom with you can even explore boredom with a different context, maybe with a friend that you spend a lot of time with. They can exchange ideas with you. So you have to characterize what your boredom is. What is it that makes you bored? Like something that's taken away from you, something that you don't have, or things that you want. What is that? And then you learn, much like everyone else, Gabriel, you're a learner. So naturally, if you can see what triggers your boredom, you can explore it. And then when you explore it, you can have like sources, friends, maybe even me as a person who can share relevant ideas, right? Much like language, in order to gain more idea and insight without literally doing it yourself, you have to be able to express what it is. It's very difficult without the ability to communicate that. So for me, when you ask me how I deal with my boredom, a lot of things I'll say is on the assumption that you are like me, and it's going to be difficult because I already mentioned that I'm pretty much high functioning all the time. So I when I'm tired, I want to be alone. I want to be bored because I get really exhausted. So my state is usually I'm high functioning with or without the internet. And most of my life is to chill out. So I'm trying really hard most of the time to be chill about it. This is the most chill I've ever been. Like me streaming has been the most chill I've ever been. If the stream goes off, it kind of gets faster. Everything gets faster. I stop needing to talk. I don't need to express myself. I don't need to slow down and think about who I'm talking to. All these things are things that are engaging me so that I can practice something. But when the stream goes off, like for example, at my job, if someone is, say, they spend 8 hours doing, I don't know, writing an essay, say they need to do 1,000 words essay, I would write until the next day. Like in my head, I would do like 20,000 words. I do it until I am really tired. So the problem is I don't know when to stop. And that's probably why when I say, how do I deal with boredom? I don't. It's very difficult. So most of my days I've been exploring this boredom thing through others. So I talk to other people about how they solve boredom or what makes them bored. And oftentimes it really does deal with social media. It comes up all the time. Social media, video games, they're hyperstimulated. So the only way I can like objectively suggest certain things is to slowly, a day at a time, like 5 minutes, this is going to be cliche, but 5 minutes of meditation. Usually meditation is too isolating. That's too deficiency in stimulation. You can pick something that is less stimulating. So for example, if you're used to seeing music video, if you're used to YouTube, listen to an audiobook. What that does is it limits the amount of stimulation. If audiobook is too much, or like it's still like too, if you can go lower, look at a picture. Just a static picture. Look at a static picture. Maybe several static pictures. Or you can read a book, right? So what I mean by that is you're lowering the amount of stimulus you need, like stimuli you need. You'll come to realize that, okay, at some point, it's like, oh, the audiobook, it's now a moving picture in your head. You see what I mean by that? So here's a challenge. Video gamers, I usually talk to video gamers a lot. Here's a challenge for yourself. If you can take 10 minutes and listen to an audiobook and make the image in your head. So what I mean by that is, unlike a YouTube video, right? Unlike a YouTube video, which provides more stimuli, so you have eyes, ears, and stuff, you can limit one of these to now your ears, and you can make the image in your head. So what you're doing is now you're doing more work. But your more work is yourself. It's dependent on yourself. Now, you can go the other route and read a book, but without imagery, without like image, a literal image, right? There are many ways to get closer and closer to be self-dependent. If you're trying to say, oh, what's a pragmatic way to approach boredom? As in, how can I become more patient or be self-sufficient to disconnect from a tool that is providing you stimulus? You can train yourself in a slow, steady way. Then you can increase it to like 20 minutes, whatever works. And the way it does is that you're training yourself to divorce yourself from that. And then you can always go back. The idea is, in order to not become dependent on hyperstimulation, you must slowly practice when there isn't hyperstimulation. A lot of people would do the whole cold turkey thing, which cold turkey thing where Cozy is suggesting. So you like, or TikTok with flickering the reels constantly so you don't touch the phone. Yeah, there are many ways. Like, they're doing many ways to continue to engage you. Like the autoplay in TikTok is pretty insane. And then lots of people, their suggestion is cold turkey, as in you lock your phone up. Oftentimes this is much like fitness programs. Like, how do you lose weight? Starve yourself. So this leap deals with discipline and motivation, right? But it's often inconsistent. It's incredibly inconsistent. So how you can do it is become creative and bridge the gap. Bridge the gap between hyperstimulated, in my opinion, hyperstimulant dependent, to like semi-stimulant. And then so on, and you work down. You slowly work down, much like learning. You take babies, take manageable steps. At least that's my opinion. And we're not talking about something that works overnight. This takes years. However, you'll see naturally that you'll have the answers yourself, in my opinion. You have always struggled with vividly picturing images in my head outside very specific things. My mom's smile, for example. Other things flicker in and out for me. I think I have some form of... Oh, you do have some form of aphantasia. Interesting. Though I never thought about the fact that I've had a TV computer my entire life. Curious if that prevented me from developing something. I think it's always worth exploring. And, hello, Jamie. Yeah, 10 days to the big 100. The big 100 review, actually. Seems like it can... Okay. One thing currently breaking my brain with learning Mandarin is that Japanese... okay. Yeah, iku. Or I in ku is like go, perform, behave, that sort of thing. But in Mandarin, that is okay. Oh. Seems like it can also mean the same thing in Mandarin, go, behave, but in menus and games, you'll see as okay. Oh. Oh, I see. Yes and no. Okay. Yeah. Therapy, like, this might sound like therapy, but generally speaking, it's rehabilitation, like it's conditioning. I'm talking about lots of strategies for reconditioning. I did the opposite, by the way, Gabriel. So if you're curious, what I did was I was incredibly high functioning when I was younger, and I needed to take steps to chilling out. So I removed stimulation most of my life because I was too hyperstimulated even without the social media. So when social media, then eventually when social media took hold, I already have many strategies in place to prevent myself from being hyperstimulated again. So when I was younger, before the internet, before the internet, I practiced how to like moderate. I mean, it was tough though. Moderate things like the rise of video games, like the rise of consoles, the rise of PC. It still was a battle because I still failed a lot of times. Like World of Warcraft was terrifying. And then I got stuck on gacha games, gacha mobile games. I've went through many phases of hyper stimulation. Like gacha mobile games, I'll literally describe to you a nightmare scenario of how this is a perfect storm for high functioning people. One time I tried to play, I'm a free to play player, right, for gacha games. So there's this thing where if you're hardcore about staying free to play, you have to play non-stop to keep up with the premium players. And there was a time when I still did research like for 13 hours a day, and then I would take naps where I trained myself to tap the phone half awake to farm on the mobile game. So there are so many ways I can tell you that if you're like anywhere near where I am, I tend to try to manage the stimulation. And sure enough, most of the things that I use to manage my own problems or like imbalance can be applied to a lot of people who are struggling in the opposite direction, where they're very dependent on hyperstimulation when you take it away, because you're so normalized to a level of stimulation. It's hard to remove something you've grown up with your whole life, like the internet. Yeah. Oh yes, those games, especially like Flappy Bird and Cookie Clicker. Yep. There was one time I wrote up and graded an entire section, like all the exams, and my left hand was being used to farm. I legitimately trained my left hand autonomously to tap in a very specific pattern. So it's kind of like maintaining a rhythm in one hand and then grading the whole time. And I still do it today, but I do it in a healthy way. So like I play live service games so that I can stop thinking, as in I do relaxing things in a different manner. Some people can meditate, some people can go out on walks, and I suggest that to a lot of people. If you can go out for a 10-minute walk and come back and write down what you were thinking, you can probably learn a lot about yourself. Because when you're deprived of something and you enter a new environment, all the things you currently do offers contrast to that environment. So when you're walking for 10 minutes, like you leave your phone behind, you leave whatever you're behind, you enter a new environment for those 10 minutes, like maybe a loop around your neighborhood or something, and you come back and you write down what was on your mind, you can probably learn a lot about yourself, that what is occupying your mind most of the time. Some people might say, I was thinking about when I was going to get back on TikTok. I was thinking I just wasted 10 minutes because it's not important to me. There are a lot of ways to like evaluate yourself and other people. Like if you tell other people what you thought, that's usually how I get into the mindset of other people. I tend to ask them, right, hey, go for a 5-minute walk, come back, tell me 2 or 3 things that came to your mind, and let's start there, right? Because you cannot operate on something without the person you're talking to having some level of self-awareness. It's incredibly hard to reach someone when you're making assumptions about them. And that's kind of where all this happens. But you can do that with yourself as well. Sometimes that goes a long way to living life more deliberately and intentionally, as opposed to passively. And what I mean by passively is not the whole learning thing and doing what you want, but thinking about all the things that are making you feel bad, right? Things that happen compulsorily. Like I have a lot of compulsions because I spend a lot of time managing those compulsions. I might sound like I make it sound easy, like, oh, just do X, Y, and Z. It's because, in my opinion, my normal is that I have to manage these compulsions. But when you can have time and make time for your compulsions, usually people find out how to navigate them. It's kind of like a journey of self-discovery, right? You probably seen anime or a movie or something where that person goes on a trip of self-enlightenment, but it doesn't have to be like a 30-year trip or something. It could be as short as starting with a 5-minute walk, or sitting alert but focused on yourself on a chair doing something that you didn't do before, and then asking yourself, what are you thinking, what are you doing then? And that's kind of what I do every day. I literally do it every day. The beginning of every stream, I literally ask myself, what did I do yesterday? because I was like recalling what I learned and all that stuff. Just some ideas. You start small, as smart. Start as reasonably acceptable, but it is not zero, right? Not changing anything won't solve anything, kind of thing, right? So boredom, tough topic. It's one of the topics that I have not a lot of stories. I don't have a lot of stories to share with people because I have a very hard time. I have a very hard time emotionally emotionally connecting with people with boredom. Usually I'm the guy who stops the boredom from happening, as in, if my friends are bored, I make them not bored, right? Like if they're my friends, I'm gonna go out of my way to stop them from being bored in my own way. And usually it's not like social media most of the time, because there are many different ways you can make someone not bored. Be a good friend is one of them. Keep them company, talk to them about something, ask them about their lives. That's more than social media. Social media provides parasocial relationships. Friendship doesn't. Friendship provides interpersonal relationships. It still creates dependency though. Just to keep in mind, I always am very, very careful of this. When I like to help people, I have to also make sure that they learn and understand that I may never always be there, kind of thing. Because dependency is one thing, but you can't be dependent on every stranger you come across or every person you come across. It's nice to be realistic and build up yourself so that you can be self-dependent as well. So usually, if I'm ever in trouble and I ask help from a friend and that friend helps me, I best be making sure I learn something from that friend. How is that friend helping me? What is that friend doing that's helping me? And then I can take that with me. So when my friend's not around, or whenever my resource or my dictionary, right, my G-Show or my Duolingo, when it's taken away from me, I don't need it. I would love to have it. I don't need it. So in the beginning of every stream, I do exactly that. I spend the 30 minutes to 1 hour doing something that's not dependent on Duolingo. Because eventually, I hope people don't like go up to someone and start talking in a target language and then pulls up Duolingo and say, wait, 1 second. Let me wait. Oh yeah, it's section 3, unit 9. And it's like word 460. Oh, okay. I'm ready to speak now. So that's kind of what I'm doing. But I'm doing it super, super slowly. So slowly that most people don't even like it. And that's fine. But that's how I approach things. I don't think I ever get bored of something. It's rarely hard for me to give up on things too. Like giving up on things is a problem. The opposite is bad too, when you don't know when to give up. So it's always in the middle, right? It's moderation. The grass is not always greener on the other side as well. When you're constantly not bored, you get exhausted. You end up like me and you get burnt out on anything you touch. So I always keep myself grounded. Whenever someone says, oh yeah, have you considered, like your library suggestion? If I didn't work on myself today, I could drop everything I do and then do the library suggestion. And then I'll burn myself out really, really hard. So yeah, just thought I offer the opposite problem. Actually, having you read that out loud made it more sense to me, and also contextualize the Japanese grammar point in a way that is definitely not connected to Mandarin. I was about to say, Shady, when you say to go, it also means yes. in my opinion. Like, what I mean is, when I was reading it, I was like, I don't understand. They're related. Because if you see the menu, right? If you see the menu and say yes or no, if you say let's go, then it's still let's go. Like when you say yes, it's like let's go, right? Like yes, proceed, or go, kind of thing. So go and yes, in my opinion, funny enough, I didn't get a chance to respond to your Mandarin thing. I think they're one and the same, in my opinion. So when I think of your menu, your game menu thing, I was like, yeah, I mean, that still kind of makes sense to me. So maybe that's what you're referring to, Shady. Yeah, I can kind of see why they use yes and no and okay. Like okay means like let's go, like okay, proceed. Yeah, the grammar point in Japanese is te ha I kenai. Te hai kenai. Kenai grammar point, which is used to say like you must do something. Okay. Oh. And how does iku come in? Okay, so tabe naku tabe naku. Oh, naku te hai denai. You must eat. Literally, if you don't eat, it can't go. Oh, okay. Yes, I see. Wow, how do you even pronounce that? How is it broken up in its pitch accent? Oh, it is the wa particle. Okay, okay. So, tabe naku. So, tabe nakute wa ikenai. Oh, ikenai. Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. Yeah, yeah. So ikenai. Ikenai is the can't do. I see. Form of iku. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Ah. Yeah. 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 So there you go. Isn't it great? I personally, what you just demonstrate to me, Shady, sometimes just being around other people, in my opinion, like you, whenever you make comments and then whenever Gabriel makes comments, life doesn't get boring, in my opinion. Because new ideas spawn from almost the most unexpected places when your mind is open to it, as opposed to closed to it. Where like, oh yeah, I can only learn Japanese from Anki. Sorry Anki fans. I know there are a lot of people who love Anki out there, but it's the most frequently thing. You don't have to only learn from certain things. I one of the most inspiring things for my artwork was literally looking at images of dry paint. But if you think dry paint is uninteresting, then it can't ever do anything for you. If you know what I mean. It's kind of like I don't like this phrase, but don't hate it. Don't hate it until you try it kind of thing, but that's not quite the idiom I'm looking for. Inspiration comes from very unexpected places. And what bigger source of inspiration than interacting with another human being? There's a big caveat these days, though. To me, one thing that I'm incredibly bittersweet about the internet is that the internet has ushered in a golden age of information. However, the people that use that information has become so dependent on that tool that I lost the person that I'm talking to. So what I mean by this is, if I ask someone, hey, how you liking Duolingo? And then this person will spout out what all the things they learned online. But rarely were they capable of expressing their thoughts their observations and how they agree or disagree with the information they're taking in. So what happens is I hear an echo chamber that overshadows that person's capacity to critically think or solve problems of their own. So when someone comes around and say, "Oh, did you know that this and this and this and this?" My first question is, how did you learn that? Also, why do you know that? And how did you come across that information? And the person would struggle, in my opinion, for expressing that. They would say something like some pragmatic reason, like, "Oh, you need to know grammar structure because people say that you need to know this grammar structure. And then because you need to know this grammar structure, you also need these resources to know this." Like, but wait. Slow down. So are you telling me that the whole time you connected all the dots from someone else, a collective somewhere, and you still were unable to answer why you do all these things well enough for me to understand that this is your choices, your opinions, and your ability to synthesize information, not something that you're following and being prescribed by, right? That's kind of the bittersweetness in things. Like it comes off even like this, where someone would say, "Duolingo is awful." And I asked the person, say, "Okay, can you describe how it's awful? Like what did you do? Like, how is it awful, right? How is it awful? I need to know. I want to know." And it would start with something like, "Well, people say it's awful." Okay. So then I ask, "Did you use it before?" And then they're like, "Well, yes." And I'm going to say, when I hear they say it, I use it. My question then would be asked, "So how did you use it? What did you expect from using it?" So eventually, this person will take it personal, because it is personal. I care about them personally, their input, but they will take it personally in the sense that they will withdraw from answering. So they'll be like, "Well, why does it matter?" It's like, "Do you not believe me?" It's like, "Well, technically, yes, I don't believe you, but that's not the point. My main concern is, can you tell me how, what? Did you even record why? Did you think it's awful? Like, do you think it's awful, or someone is telling you it's awful?" Right? Those are two very big different things. They're incredibly different things. And in the scope of the internet, sometimes it can be, and it's perfectly normal. It's the human condition, right? It's gotten to a point where it's very hard to know if it's your opinion, or it's someone else's opinion. And also whether they're true or not. Whether they're true or not, right? For you or the other person, or whatever. So it's very difficult. I'm not saying this is easy. It's incredibly hard. And that's why it gets very personal, right? And whenever I see the person withdrawing, I back up. I definitely try to back up. But from time to time, I do push kind of hard. As long as I know, if I can determine if the person is willing to entertain my curiosity, I tend to push a little bit harder than usual. Because to me, I think if you can explain how, why you hate something, then I can truly believe that you are the person who is thinking and talking to me, not something you see on YouTube over and over again, and that's what you've come to accept as true. And I kid you not, Hank Green did a vlog on this recently, and his YouTube video was, well, there are things I believe that are lies, or something like that. It was like titled, "These are the lies that I believe," or "These are the things that I got wrong." And he talked about how, like, yeah, in the context of the internet, you're given so much information, but it's to the point, right? It's not humanly reasonable to know that there's gonna be things that you believe in that are reinforced by mere exposure and accepted as like logical and rational truth, which turned out to be not true, right? So even to the most self-aware and perceived individuals, it still happens. I do it all the time. Like, what was one? I need a good example, but yeah. In English, we also have this saying like "go, no go." Yeah, exactly, which means yes and no. Yo, go and no go. Yeah, that's a no go. That's a go. That's a no go. Very good. And then watching paint dry is fun though. It really is. If you see a time lapse picture of paint, it's pretty cool. Which, by the way, there's a viral trend for like a paint substance, like a paint-like substance that removes rust, and watching it in a time lapse is mesmerizing. I don't know what it is, what the product is, but it's like you paint it onto it, and then it like blows up into this really cool pattern, and then it's supposed to remove the rust. I don't know what it is, but I saw a couple videos. I'm like, that's pretty cool. People would think you're down their throat, yeah, and saying they are wrong, yeah. And for me personally, I'm like, I really want to know what their opinion, and I think a lot of times it can be one and the same, and that's when I feel that I can misunderstand people and offend people, when by coincidence their opinions are also reflective by the culture, right? Like by the echo chamber. So like when someone says something is awful for any number of reasons, X, Y, Z, right? X, Y, Z, and then it turns out after they experienced it, it's still X, Y, Z, right? I have those experiences. I actually concede. I often say like, oh yeah, I'm conceding. It's like, oh yeah, yes, yeah, I can't. So what can I say? So all the things that Duolingo, that people say that Duolingo doesn't do, I actually agree with most of them. Now the question is, when I'm thinking about why, how, and who, they're different answers. They're different answers, right? I didn't take the word of the people that observe the same thing. So that's the difference, in my opinion. It's a big difference. Observations can be factual. Answers and interpretations is a human filter. So when someone says something is awful, awful is a human filter. What Duolingo do and don't are observations. So when someone says Duolingo is awful, that's a filter. So I ask, how? What are the observations you made? And then how does that lead you to explaining it's awful? Not Duolingo is awful because X is better. That to me is the biggest red flag for echo chamber. Because this raises the question, Do you even use X? Do you use Duolingo? How is one better, and how do Duolingo and X interact? They probably don't even interact. Like, my first question would be like, does X's devs know Duolingo's devs? Right? Are they even aware of each other? Like, do they work on same projects and designs? Like, how are they related? How do you know that Duolingo is awful because X is better? That's a gigantic leap of logic. I don't even want to get into orange and like oranges, comparing oranges and apples. But if you can create this link, I'm with you. I'm with you. So you have a lot to explain to me how this works. But this is like nearly 90% of how logic works, in my opinion. From my flag isn't red. Oh yeah, that's fair. Use your imagination. I'm just kidding. So, that's the kind of thing when it comes to the internet hustle culture. Like, some people, like, I don't even know if people are convinced that they are bored. Oh, and yeah, it was a great video. I think Hank's video, I like Hank also like disclosed like, yeah, it's clickbaity too. Like, did you see Hank's recent video for SciShow? It was about COVID and its a potential association with cancer. Yeah, it was a clickbait, and he had like a preface for the clickbait and stuff. It's so good. Like, oh, you're too tired. Oh, you're too tired. I don't know if do you watch? So there's this like COVID. So I don't know if people ever catch the headlines. It's gonna circulate. I had my suspicions, but COVID may or may not. There are some associations that may increase the risk of post-COVID infection related carcinogens, right? Oh, color it red. It's fine. It's gone. It's gone. The red flag is gone. It's fine. All right. Anyways, let's get back on focus. I appreciate that. I will cut this. I'll cut this section out. Did I spend like an hour? I spent like an hour. I think it's a great question. It started with how do I deal with boredom, right? Yeah. How do I deal with boredom? It's so interconnected. Sometimes you don't have to deal with boredom. You can substitute for boredom. And what I mean by that is, if your dependency on social media is hurting your lifestyle, find a friend who's not dependent on social media, for example. I don't know how you do that, but maybe there's some channels you can do. And then it's not finally got my IEM, so I can switch between simplified traditional characters. Ooh, nice. I actually need a little help with that too, now that I think about it, in the future. But yeah, so I think here's my tier list. Dependency on dependency. Not a tier list, sorry. That's too hot take. That's too hot. It's not a tier list for hot, but dependency. There's complete dependency, right? And then there's incomplete dependency. And people are on this spectrum. Now the question is, how do I qualify complete and incomplete? Ask yourself, list the things you do to address the problem or the perceived problem that you have. So let's just say boredom, right? Just boredom. So if you can list, the greater the list grows, as you get closer and closer to incomplete dependency, the items on your list grows. All right. And if you are not satisfied, in my opinion, if you are not satisfied by what's on this list, then you are likely having a bigger dependency on the thing. So for example, if you're saying social media encompasses 90% of your uptime, that is one item that counts for nearly all your dependency on boredom. For example, we're talking about boredom here. So you have the rest of your life, right, to slowly find a number 2 if you can, a number 3, a number 4. I hum to myself when I'm running. I run. I eat food. I try to make my eating experience a carving of boredom. So as you're growing this list, your dependency will become more and more incomplete per se. And another great word would be more diverse. Your dependency would be more diverse. So no, you don't necessarily have to be completely independent. Like, I think being 100% independent is naive, because humans are social creatures. To some extent, we are dependent on certain things, especially other human beings. So, however, you can strive for independency, but if we're specifically talking about how boredom is acting on dependency, then ask yourself, how many things do you have access to that addresses boredom? And then how many things you don't know of, like you go around to explore what you don't know, and then you go around inspiring yourself to figure out other things to address this. And that gives you flexibility, Gabriel. It gives you flexibility. I usually focus on accessibility for people. So like we flip, and I ask the person, okay, what are you willing to try here? And then they list like 10 things, and then I organize it by accessibility. As in, if someone says they like to sing, where can they sing? Well, they can sing anytime, provided their voice is healthy, right? So if there's, most of the time, that's super accessible. Let's start with singing, because that will be able to take up a lot of, it will be able to disperse the dependency on things. And that's kind of where you go, right? That's kind of, all right, going to hop in the shower, then get ready to head to the store, and maybe back later, depending on, if not, yeah, take care, Shady. It was nice. Sorry, I gotten too much into this, but thank you. It's always a pleasure hearing your thoughts and